With screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emmanuel Rose.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining Nature Bound today. My guest is Tommy Serafinski, and Tommy is an outdoorsman that champions biodiversity, conservation, hunting, fishing, and something we're going to get into, rewilding. He's a speaker and a podcast host, and it is my pleasure to have you on today, Tommy. Thanks for taking the time.
Emmanuel, thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure. It's great to be on your podcast.
Now, the first thing I want to understand is where in the world you live and what kind of public access is there for you to do the things you're interested in doing?
Okay, so I live in Ireland. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm not an English native speaker. I come from Poland. I was born in Poland. I live in Ireland. It is pushing 20 years now. And so the access is, on one hand, it is very easy to get into the outdoors activities, at least from my perspective, coming from Poland and coming from like a city environment, because I always say I'm a city boy, born and raised. And when I moved to Ireland, then it's like this whole outdoorsy world opened up. However, literally, virtually all the land is privately owned in Ireland.
Right.
So you don't have a concept of public land. There is like usually when you're talking about hunting, you basically need either permission from a farmer who owns the farm and can give you permission to hunt on his farm, or you need a permit from the private company that is charged with managing state land. It's two of those companies. One is called Kilche, there is a Vion, and essentially they're timber companies. They are charged in producing timber. So they also have like a deer management plans, but then it's like more difficult to get the permission on them because there you go through the really like a bidding process so you need more people, and so it's a little bit more complicated to hunt on their lands. So it's usually most of recreational hunters basically goes on the permits from the landowners, from the farmers. When it comes to fishing, so essentially sea fishing is open for all.
Yep.
You don't need a license. You don't need anything. You just, take a rod and go out and fish. When it comes to fishing on the lakes and the rivers, that's a little bit more complicated. On most lakes and rivers, you can fish without permit for, pikes and some coarse fishing and stuff like that. When we talk about salmon and sea trout, then you need to buy a license, like a state license.
Sure.
And that license comes with a couple of tags that then will allow you to fish for salmon, fish for sea trout, and also retain 2 or 3 fish in a season. They need to be tagged and then reported back. So that's
you have to get permission from a landowner to get on and fish.
No, not really, unless you're gonna cross his land. Then it's kind of like a trespass situation. But usually when you're I always say, because there's like this big discussion about right of way and right to roam and all those things. And yourself on my podcast, I often deal with this subject in the context of Ireland as well as the UK, where there's like a big conversation: is the right to roam right thing and the bad thing, and how it impacts conservation, how it impacts attitudes towards nature, and so on. And like my attitude towards this is always like, you can have your own right to roam by basically contacting the landowner. Like, to me,
Yeah.
it's a basic courtesy. It is not difficult to find out in the land register who owns the property. And I was getting permissions to hunt through mail, through just like physical mail,
Oh
when
yeah.
I just email, and I was like, hey, I'm a hunter, I'm insured, do you mind? And like, yeah, sure, work away.
Right.
So it's just maybe a little bit off topic here, but on the subject of right to roam, and in terms of what's happening in Ireland and the UK, I always think, like, if you want to have if you want to have access, there's a basic courtesy. Go to the landowner, strike the conversation, and usually they will say yes. And if they say no, and you're not welcome on their land, even if you have in theory right to roam there, do you really want to be there?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, what was it? What was your first kind of foray into outdoor activities? How old were you, and where were you, and who took you out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like I said, I'm born and raised in the city, but still, we had like a summer cottage in a countryside. So it was usually during summer holidays. We were spending like 2 months in this summer cottage,
Oh,
which was like a
nice.
rural area, and we were going mushroom picking and to the forest and so. But still, I was a kid, and then maybe early adulthood when I was still in Poland.
Right.
So I kind of like, it was toying with the ideas about hunting, but it was like really difficult to get into hunting, especially coming being born in the city and raised in the city. You didn't have the connection with the culture or with people who hunt.
Yeah.
And especially then again in the Poland, it was like prolonged process to be even allowed to hunt. You need to do like a 2 years of work, like, so that was not on the cards. But I started fishing. So my really like a proper outdoorsy time started with fishing on the lake. And I was fishing on the lake. I was fishing on the, like, this sort of like a commercial ponds they had, like,
Right.
just like a big pond, and they just putting fish in, and you were fishing there. So that's how I was starting.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Warsaw, where through Warsaw there's a Vistula River, a big river. And then that was like a more serious type of fishing, where I had to like figure out everything. Oh wow, there's like a lot of water coming through this, and just like not the same as in the pond. So I had to figure out, and these moments of like a first, like a proper DIY fish, meaning like you found yourself the venue, you found yourself the place, the spot, the what bait works. It's like, there it is.
Yeah.
Um,
And what kind of fish are those in that river?
bream, some pike, asp. It was like a big, like a trophy kind of fish, asp.
Mhm.
There was a chance for catfish as well, but I never caught a catfish on Vistula River.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Ireland, and here, I'm living in a coastal village. It's actually a fishing village, and the whole sea fishing thing opened up. And being on the coast of the North Atlantic, shark fishing and ray fishing and bass fishing in the estuaries and all that thing. So I went just like completely crazy. And then naturally, like a next step to me was getting to hunting, because again, it was like so much more accessible.
Right.
So then I started also hunting, and yeah, so that's like a ladder that I went through.
I gotcha. And then is there a kind of a culture in Ireland for car camping, or are you just going out for a day trip, or how does that look?
No, I think the country is too small for doing like maybe, like, I presume that you would easily find someone who would say like, oh yes, brother, there's like big culture. Like, it's usually within I'm spoiled, because like just behind me 900 meters is the coast, and the beach that I can go fishing. So
Right.
it's usually when I want to do some pike fishing on the lake, I drive maybe hour, where my friend is running fishing lodge, and he also runs like a boat hire and stuff in there. And so we going pike fishing for a day. But usually, like within the out, like, you folks in the US, like when you hear like an our drive, you're just laughing, right? Like here, like our drive is like, oh man, it's our drive. So so I'm kind of like in the middle, being from Poland, which is a much bigger country than Ireland, but at the same time nowhere near what United States are, because it's a whole freaking continent, or half of a continent. But it's usually day trip.
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense. Well, good. And then did you have time that you were doing this with your family, or were you just Tommy on his own figuring all this stuff out?
Yeah, Tommy's on his own.
Oh.
that was always my thing. I in general, I have this this thing that it's better probably when you do stuff on your own. Like so there is an aspect of learning from someone, right? And for example, I need to give credit. There's a guy who was at the time, his name was also Tom, and he was also from Poland. He came to Ireland probably 2 years before me, and he figured out a lot of things about bass fishing, and then he taught me everything I needed to know about bass fishing. So that he was obviously the I'm not trying to dismiss this teacher apprentice relation, which is very important, and it is very helpful in all those endeavors. But then at the end of the day, you need to have this drive yourself to do it. I always give this example when I was a kid, like in my late teens, and we were going to the gym, right? Like a bodybuilding gym.
Yep.
And the guy who was running like a president of this organization, of this gym, he was saying like, only people who came on their own, they're stay. Like if you come with your buddy, it's not that it helps you. It's the opposite, because like, and there your buddy doesn't want to go, so I'm not gonna go if he doesn't go. And he said like, you're demotivating each other, not motivating each other usually. So, and I think this is the same thing. Like if you have this drive to do it yourself, then you're gonna get into it and keep doing. If that someone will be taking you and then they're not gonna take you, you're gonna go yourself. So no, it was always so obviously I go fishing with buddies, with with other people. A few times my fiance was with me on the boat. We were fishing from both sea fishing and a lake, fishing on the lake, but it's usually like my time. It's
nice. Yeah, I got you. That's cool. So you're involved in this conversation about conservation, and I enjoyed that episode that you did on your own. That was kind of a tease to get people to think about whether they're actually conservationists or if they're just writing checks and the philosophy behind it. So anything you want to talk about on the conservation?
Well, yeah. So the whole episode was I think it was 174. Because like I said, a lot of people claim conservation, and it is often that just a pat on the back. They either try to justify what they do, or and especially in the context of I it was like a little jab in for hunters, especially hunters in the US, where it's like, oh, hunters are conservationists, we're all conservationists. Like, well, you're in a system that supports conservation, but are you really a conservationist? Are you doing this work for conservation or for fun? And just by the way, just to be clear here, I am as pro hunting as they come, and I think that if you hunt, you don't need excuse. You don't need to excuse for going hunting. Oh, because it's a conservation. It's a maintaining natural balance. And if we wouldn't be hunting, we will all die by deer. And like we don't need that. I always think that the truth will set you free, and we need to be honest about what's going on. So I think, and moreover, I think if we want to ensure the future for hunting needs to be able to stand on its own feet, stands on its own for what it is, rather than being justified by, it's a conservation work, it's this and that, right? And we've seen examples all over the world, like for example in Australia, right, where a lot of hunters like, we have invasive species and we're controlling all those species and whatever, right? As if this is like a main reason why they're hunting. And then government steps in and go like, all right, we're gonna eradicate all those invasive species, right? And then hunters like, oh no, we actually want those animals there,
Yeah,
right?
we actually like going out and hunting them.
Exactly. So I just don't want this episode to be, and I was like I was talking about bird ringers, and I was talking about NGO members of NGOs and all sorts of that. But on hunting specifically, I think that hunting needs to be able to stand on its own, and it doesn't need to do that crutch that we do conservation, especially that really it is not conservation. We are in a system, like in the US, you have excellent regulations, Dingell-Johnson Act, Pittman-Robertson. Money goes to conservation. That is fantastic, but that doesn't make you a hunter, a conservationist, only because you're in this system. So that was the main thing. And as far as NGOs, the same thing, right? It's an easy thing, like pat yourself on the back and it's like, oh, I'm paying for this NGO. And then what that NGO does, right? I was member of a few NGOs, and you go in and you see like a membership levels, and you pick the membership level that you're willing to pay monthly, and it says like, oh, it only covers cost of the membership, which is your colorful magazine and whatever, right? And I go like, no, I don't want that. Do you have option without that magazine? Emmanuel, I have a stacks of colorful magazines about sharks and birds and all those things. They all gathering dust and gonna end up in the recycling bin. Okay. I don't need them. Like if I pay my $5.99 or $10.99, I want this money to go to conservation. I don't need your magazine. So then again, my point was like, review what is where your money are going, and what is any given organization actually doing. Are they actually doing conservation work to which you contribute, which is great, and there's a lot of great organizations like that, or is it just like a conservation communication outlet?
Right. Yep.
So and this is thoughts that I had, and then I read the book that the author was talking about, like similar things. And I was like, yeah, he got exactly same thoughts that I did. Like, just review where are your money are going and whether you can spend it better.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tommy. And I think I take it one step further, and I say, how much dirt time are you scheduling into your life? Right? Like, it's great that you're going to write a check to the Sierra Club or Ducks Unlimited and whatever. I mean, we need those organizations. But to me, somebody who's a conservationist is going to be spending time with their feet in the dirt and observing and doing the things that they love and care about. Otherwise, it's just an intellectual exercise. It's not actually a lifestyle.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I loved that episode, and I was like, oh man, somebody's talking about something I've been thinking about, and I was like, go get him, Tommy.
Excellent.
So tell me about the hunting that you're doing and why you do it, like at the deepest level. Why are you a hunter?
Oh, to me it was natural progression from fishing. Okay, I'll get to the deeper parts of that as well. So it was natural progression from fishing, and I was really surprised to some extent how different that is, even though on surface it looked the same. The responsibility that you have, like if when you fish, you can do catch and release. Right. And you just hook up a number of fish, you release them, you go home, you're done with it.
Yeah.
If you're successful on a hunt, man, there's a work to do to be done.
It just starts the second you kill an animal.
It just exactly. And I was like, especially in the early days, where again I was figuring out most of this stuff on my own, right? Yeah. So like first year I was on a number of like 3 or 4 hunts with the experienced hunter. I wasn't successful. We haven't shot anything, but I kind of like I got my got idea how the thing works, how you ambush, how you try to sneak up on the animal, how the animal even look in the natural environment, because you know, when you're starting, you don't know. You know, I remember distinctly, it was like a second hunt I was on, and we had the binoculars, and he goes like, there is a deer, and I'm looking through the binoculars, I don't see it. Like, where, like there, and he's like, and I go like, behind that pole. And he goes like, it's not a pole, it's a deer, right? It's like, I didn't have you just don't know how what you're looking for, right?
Right.
So that was that initial thing. So I and then after that, it was like another year when I had the permissions on the farms. I was going out, you know, myself, and the whole year I haven't shot anything because I was just helpless. I didn't know, like, I was learning. I was only learning how to do those things.
Dirt time. That's the benefit of dirt time.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, it was these moments where you know, like, mostly I hunt Sika deer, which are crepuscular animals, so really like only after, and then you have your legal light is hour after sunset, so it's like, you know, really getting dark, and it's late in the day, and, you know, remember, I need to still drive back home, and, you know, and I was like, almost like, I saw this deer, and like almost something in me wanted this deer to spook, because then I have to shoot it, and then the amount of work I have to do, right? It was like this weird thing.
Yeah.
And I was sharing that with my fiance at the time, and she goes like, so do you want to kill that deer or not? And I was like, well, I do, but it's like this weird thing.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, this, like I said, it only starts once you have an animal, and so on. So, you know, why I'm doing, like, I think it is down to interaction with the.
Come on back.
We're in that why photography can't replace hunting, right? You always sometimes hear that argument, like, oh, go and, you know, take a photos, you don't have to kill the animals,
right?
And someone's just saying like, no, because like when you're photographing, you're observing. When you're hunting, you're participating. You're becoming part of the site. You're becoming. You're in, you know, your aim, you have this work to do, and then you have a food, then you can eat it. So I think that this is why it kind of like, this is this itch that I scratch this way for this interaction, and go on, you know, understanding where game trails, and, you know, if you do like an ambush hunting, like I do mostly, you are in one place, and, you know, like, okay, first you see a hare, right? The hare goes in, and then you see the fox patrolling over there, and then deer comes out, right? Okay, but something happened, you didn't shoot the deer. Then you're sitting there the next day, right? And you see the hare, like, oh, that's the time where the hare comes out, like, I'm expect, right? And sure enough, half an hour later, the fox goes there under the hedge. It's like, okay, I know now that deer gonna come up, right? And it's just incredible, just to getting this intimate understanding what's going on, right? And then if at the end of the day you come back with the meat for your family, for your freezer, this is just, you know, nothing compares to that, you know. It's I often think that people, they will radically change their mind if they're tried, you know, if they're tried. And I was one of the first episodes of my, but I was talking with she was like a vegan, and she got like an outdoorsy organization. That's what I was, and we started talking about hunting, right? And she said like, oh, so what do you feel when you pull the trigger? Right. And I started talking about the connection with nature and all those things, right? And I saw like in her head, she was like, yeah, I never thought about that.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, see? And the animal, and I said, yeah, I think you would do just fine, right? And I saw this spark in her in her eye, like I could really do that. I could really have this connection. And so I think this is it. This is, at least this is what does it for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm with you in terms of being a participant, right? And like you're describing, the understanding not just the game animal that you're after, but also the entire milieu of the forest at that time. And you know the weather down to the how wet it is on the ground and what temperature it is, and why the animals are doing what they're doing at that time, and you get to participate at such a deep, visceral level. So
yeah,
we're brothers on that. I love it. So tell me, as we're wrapping up here, tell me about what rewilding is and how you're involved in that.
That is like the term rewilding is somewhere on the spectrum from controversial to toxic. And I had an episode with like actual professor of rewilding, like a proper scientist.
Yeah.
And it's a new term, and it's still, I think it's I don't feel like we still have an understanding what that is, and people often just, everybody grabs something what they want or don't want it to be and run with it. And so what my understanding from discussion with that gentleman, and also how I would understand that naturally, is that rewilding is landscape scale. That's, which means that in many scenarios it can't happen because there are already people on the landscape.
Right.
And this is a lot of the pushback, and there is a lot of toxicity in the conversation comes in, right? That, oh, you want to run people off the land,
right?
And that are the valid concerns, right? Because if there is a landscape that supports community, and now you want this landscape to be something else, rewilded, then it cannot support the community.
Yeah.
Well, now you can discuss, like, is it still cannot support the community? Is there other ways that community still be? And there are discussions on that. I think we still have a lot to learn on what rewilding is, what rewilding isn't, and whether we have a chance or not to rewild anything. Like one thing for sure, it has to be, if it's to be successful, it has to be with the support of people who living on the landscape, because otherwise it just not, a little bit like we started this conversation. Even if you in theory have a right to roam, but the farmer doesn't want you on this land, do you want to be there? Sure. Right? Yeah. He gonna try to make your life miserable. And that's the same thing. If you want rewild, and then also like what the rewilding means, because restoration of like one particular species, that's not rewilding,
right?
So I think of rewilding is like, one, it has to be a landscape scale, and two, there is no outcome that is prescribed, which is probably different from restoration and conservation, where you have prescribed outcome. I want population of wolves to be X or grow by Y.
Right.
While in rewilding, it's whatever natural processes will do, there will do, which is very interesting from the perspective of that sometimes the outcome that nature, the trajectory that nature will take, is probably not what you want.
All right.
And there's like interesting discussion as well, right? So for the classic one is in Ireland and the UK, where you have these endangered ground nesting wader species, and then you have your mesopredators, which are overabundant because of the farming practices,
right? And
then so you need to control them, right? So you're in a scenario of a quite stringent management scenario, where you're taking out these predators to ensure so those ground nesting birds can breed and not get extinct within the next 5 years. And then like, oh, because we're gonna rewild, just leave everything alone. Like when you leave everything alone, then sure, nature will take its course, but you're gonna lose all those species, and then you're gonna end up with monoculture, and then you're gonna end up with starving predators, which is like a lot of them, but then don't have anything to eat. And nature will rebalance itself. But then, like, what are the timescales as well that we talk about it, right? If the ecosystem will rebalance itself in the next 200 years or 2,000 years,
right?
Is that a scenario you want to go into? So I think we need to be practical about it, and not dogmatic. I think that a lot of discussions about rewilding are very dogmatic. It's like, oh, this is it, and there are people that I think they figure everything out. And there's a more of a open-mindedness, and it's like, okay, what are we trying to do here? And also empathy to other people who are on the landscape or using that landscape.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we're seeing a great example of that with the reintroduction of the wolf in the Western United States, right? We're losing elk herds at a rate unintended, I believe, because the wolves are running free and there's no season on them in the Western United States. So yeah, it's great to have those apex predators, but they have to be kept in check. Otherwise, they're gonna run through everything else.
It's difficult, it's difficult, and especially that. It often goes into this like, oh, but historically this and that, and it's like really not, it's really hard to say like what is like historically,
right?
Because historically the people were on this landscape since and it's tough. I wouldn't be dismissing rewilding altogether, but then we also need to be practical about it and call it out. If you're doing like a regenerative farming, that's not rewilding,
right?
And what is the outcome? And then if you have the outcome in mind, that's not rewilding either.
Yeah.
So
okay. All right. Well, that's great. I mean, I think we could probably keep talking all day, Tommy. But
absolutely,
I appreciate your time. I hope that at some point that you make a trip to the West Coast of the United States, so you and I can go on a proper camping trip and catch some fish or go turkey hunting or something like that. So
I would love to. I might take you up on that, man.
I hope you do. We'll make sure that you have a nice cot to sleep on and a warm sleeping bag, because I know you're not used to being outside.
No, the opposite. I need the tough one, the tough part of it.
All right. Well, thanks. I really appreciate your time today, and look forward to hearing about how your deer hunts go at the end of the season here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Tommy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at emmanuelrose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and remember to get nature bound.